Welcome. We'll get started shortly. Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. There are no polling questions or attendance checks. Instead, you will demonstrate your knowledge by taking a brief multiple-choice quiz using the Earmark app. Visit earmark.app in your web browser. You can also download the mobile app by scanning the QR code on the screen. Log in, or if you're new, create your free account. Be sure to use a valid email address because that's where we'll send your course completion certificates. From the home screen, scroll down to find the course. You can also tap the magnifying glass icon to search for the course. Tap on the course artwork, then the Enroll button. On the Course tab, you'll find the recording and quiz questions. Complete the quiz to earn your CPE certificate. It takes us a few days to create the course on the app, so if you are attending this session live, please wait a few days. We'll email you a link to the course when it is ready. If you have questions or need help, email us at support@earmarkcpe.com. And now, on to the event.
Hello, everyone. I'm Zach from Earmark, and thanks for joining us live or watching this on demand. Welcome to Fix the Hidden Factory Lurking in Your Audit. And I'm going to hand this over to your instructor for today, Bill Engelhop. Bill, please take it away.
Thank you, Zach. Appreciate it. And you'll be helping me move the slides along. So thank you for that. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Looking forward to sharing this. First, before we get rolling here, a very quick question for everyone. If you could activate your comment field. If you had a magic wand and you were looking to improve one thing about how you do your auditing, be it an internal audit, external audit, how you involved in other parts of an audit, what would be the one thing that you would want to see improved? And if you could just jot that down real quick in the chat. Also, if you have another second, just let me know where you are and also what your role is. So magic wand question, where are you from and what your role is, and we'll go from there. Oh, we got someone way far away in Croatia. Thank you. Cincinnati's checking in. Thank you, Cincinnati. Georgia, great. Well, as you're filling around, I'm still interested to see the magic wand thing, but here's when we ask this question of audit teams, when we do work out in the field, typically these are the kind of categories that we see in the magic wand question, right? People say they are constantly recycling the same issues every year. They have overruns in their budgets. They have overruns in their hours. Lots of balls in the air for people. The client sometimes, and also the management team will ask, we don't know what's going on with the audit. Where are you ahead or you're behind? Lots of emergencies. I know people are always unhappy about having to work overtime, late nights, weekends. Certainly those things drive turnover. Sometimes there's a blame culture that you find in audits. Clients will talk about compliance sometimes. Client relationships become an issue. So there's a lot of things at play that we deal with when we go out and try and take a look at what's seeing in the audit. So if you get the next one, Zach. So where did all this come from, right? And a little bit about my background, right? So I've been involved in both two different organizations as part of a team. And we have, over the years, taken a look at probably 20,000 different auditors, teams, clients, internal audit, et cetera. And of those 20,000 people we've touched, we've looked at probably 1,500 workshops when I was at PwC, 2,500 workshops over the years our team worked on at KPMG. And we started seeing some common threads and themes. And so the material that we're going to talk about today, the auditology approach, is really about improving the audit, improving the quality of the audit, and looking at not only what we would call Lean and Lean Six Sigma, but also dropping in some project management and training solutions. So that's where this all came from. You can go next, Zach. Thanks. And the important thing to think about, right? So my background, I'm not an auditor, I'm not a CPA. So I'm not here today to tell you how to audit, right? What I am here to tell you a little bit about, though, is how you can improve the way that you do it, right? And that's really at the core of what we're talking about. It's process improvement. It's improving the processes, the tools, the techniques that override and help you support the audit as you go forward. Next slide. So what are we going to cover today? Right. So a couple of things that we want to focus on is that there are some root causes. And as I mentioned before, I've worked on a lot of teams. We've looked at a lot of audits, and we see some pretty common themes that pop up that we would call kind of root causes. The second thing I want to talk about is that if we know what some of the causes are there ways to measure that, right? Can we drive some metrics that give us an idea of where we stand and what we need to focus on? The next thing I want to talk about is saying there are some principles. Again, these are things that we've derived from looking at all those audits that we know are proven methods that have a significant impact on improving audit efficiency and quality. And then we want to make sure everybody has some action steps, right? What are some things that you could do immediately that would have some impact on the audit? So the agenda for today, I want to talk just real quickly about this concept we call the auditor's trap. Secondly, I want to kind of dive into what we call this hidden factory, right? It's kind of our picture version of what really goes on with audits. Third, I want to talk about coaching and how important that is and what impact that has on the audit. The next thing I want to talk about is this idea of helping your staff self-correct, right? We can teach them, we can tell them, but how would people be able to do that themselves? And then lastly, leave you some final takeaways and some steps. So here's this auditor's trap. And this is very common in fields that have a highly technical component along with a managerial or a leadership component. What we end up with is people that are technical experts, but they tend to be weak in those critical skills around leadership and project management. And it's not that they don't have the capabilities there. It's just the things that they're typically not brought on or put through as part of their careers. And they're not well developed as part of their audit training. So what do we end up with? You know, what are some of the problems when we have a highly technical manager? You end up with mismanagement of projects, right? Things may, focus well on the accounting standards and the guidance, but you lose track of things that, project managers typically have, which is where are we, deadlines, allocations of resources, managing issues, that kind of thing. Second thing that you typically see from people that are highly technical is they have more of a focus on the technical stuff, and they tend to have less of a focus on all those stakeholders that have critical pieces to play in their audits, be it the client, be it specialists, be it other people in the firm that they have to be involved with. And again, it's oftentimes just not that they can't do it, it's just a blind side or a blind spot that they have. And the third thing is that when people tend to focus and really drive some of those technical issues on an audit, what they end up with is the people feel in a way kind of neglected. There's other needs of a team that are not really being met by, I would call them the technocrat. So what we say at the end is that, the audits, they rarely fail because people aren't following rules per se. But it's we lose sight of the leadership and project management skills, and it creates blind spots for us. Okay, next slide. So welcome to the hidden factory, right? You won't need a bump cap, you won't need your yellow vest. But what do we mean by the hidden factory? It's kind of our visual representation here of what constitutes all of the work that's not planned, not scheduled. It's the rework. It's correcting errors. It's fixing guidance or struggling with guidance that's not clear, and lots of things that we would say is redoing work, right? We manage the flow of the work, assuming it's going to go through the process the first time, and we never build in that time that the team needs to go and redo stuff. And that's where oftentimes these projects and audits get off track. And as one partner told me once, which I thought was a great comment, he said, I understand this hidden factory now. And he said, I can basically say that's where my audits go to die. It's where the budgets and the morale are just killed, right? And he was really spot on. And one of the leaders at Toyota, who was a founding member of kind of, I guess, of the Toyota production system, Mr. Shingo, said, the most dangerous kind of waste is the waste we do not recognize. And oftentimes, again, we skip through this. We don't account for it. We have to manage it. Let's go to the next slide. So what's one way that we can track this hidden factory, right? Well, I call the calculation the first pass yield is kind of the flashlight, because it's a way that we can kind of shine a light on how we are doing getting work through our process, however many steps in that process it is. And it's a simple calculation. It's called multiplication, right? So simple from that standpoint. And what you're doing is you look at the number of work papers that pass a step without making changes to them. And if you have a 3-step process, it's 1 times 2 times 3. If it's 4 steps, it's 1 times 2 times 3 times 4. And the accumulation of that comes up with a number, a percentage, which is what you call the first pass yield. Our goal is to have a high number, right? We want more than 85 to 90% of the work we want to see pass through the system without having to be sent back for rework. And unfortunately, what we found, and we've analyzed a lot of those audits that I talked about earlier, the first pass yields on some of these can be as low as 5%. So think about that. It's like 95% of the work that enters into the process is returned at one step or the other. Imagine the size of that factory, right? That hidden factory where all the people are busy doing rework, and you wonder why your audit is not moving forward. It's because people are running in place, fixing things. And there are all sorts of other issues that pop up with this, but understanding first pass yield is really critical. Let's go to the next slide, Zach. I'll show you an example here. So again, I said the calculation is pretty simple, right? It's 1 times 2 times 3 times 4, and you get a percentage. And if you think about, each step in your model is a quality gate or review, right? Oftentimes they're mandatory reviews because of firm guidance or external agencies require certain audits. Others are kind of voluntary. They do them extra just to make sure they're there. But however many steps in the model, that's what we would count. And as you can see, the first one is that example is doing pretty well, right? It's 90, 95 at one step, 98, and you end up with the calculation, and it runs about 83%. So that's actually doing really well. We say our target is 85% or better. But if you go down to the bottom, right, the low yielding team, that means that first step, they're kicking out 30% of the work. It's getting sent back at the first step. 60%. And then think about the last one, right? Somebody is obviously scrutinizing the partners, going through everything, right, with a fine-tooth comb, right? That's a 21% yield. That's a lot of rework. And one of the things that we often tell teams to do is like, what's the value? How much is that rework costing you, right? What is an hour of rework time? And if you start multiplying that and you think about some of these audits that we've worked with that have hundreds and hundreds of work papers, those numbers can add up pretty quickly. And you think about the amount of budget that's being expended fixing things as opposed to moving the audit forward, there's a huge disconnect there, right? And that's really where we say teams need to take a look at this and manage this. Let's go to the next slide. So action number one, right? What is the first thing that we'd ask you to do? Is take a look at that first pass yield, right? Go back, and you can do it historically. You can calculate it going forward. But, start looking at the work papers. How many are getting through without having to be sent back for revisions? And then, as I said, you can multiply that out, and you can actually start quantifying the cost of the rework in your audit. And I'm sure once you start doing this, that you'll be quite surprised at the amount of work that's being redone. And the important thing to remember, right, and I think a lot of people, sometimes get hung up on this, is that I'm not telling people here to not review work, okay? The management and supervision component of an audit is critical to ensure the work is done well, that people, if there's some learning and so forth to it. What I would like to see, though, is that people are reviewing it, and when they do review the work, there are no corrections or changes or review notes that are generated, and it moves on to the next spot. So how do we get the work right the first time, right? Can we do that? Is that possible, right? Let's go to the next slide. So coaching, right? And this is really one of the things I would say, if we were going to improve the quality and reduce the amount of volume that the rework and the review notes causes, coaching is probably the first place that I would go. And what we talk about here is that, are we fixing the coaching, not just the work papers? And the key here is that, how do we set the work up in the first place so that the individual doing the work, the associate, the senior, whoever, knows what is required of them and has a fairly high probability they're going to get the work done per the specifications in whatever shape or form those take. And that's really what we're talking about. And one of the things that was really interesting was a piece of news that popped up the other day. The Illinois CPA Society just did a really interesting study, and they looked at the disconnect between what managers think they're doing versus what employees think they're doing. And in the area around coaching, there's a pretty significant disconnect. The study was talking about where managers have a fairly high sense that they're getting the content and the message out of their coaching. On the other hand, it's really low numbers for the particularly the new people, thinking they're actually getting the coaching they need to go forward. So let's take a look at the next slide, Zach. So what do we talk about, right? What's our model? And our goal here is to get out of this framework that we call briefing, right? And we all have been through this loop, right? Where you sit down, someone is going to explain something to you, and it's like a fire hose, right? I had one person tell me that during some of these, quote, briefings, if they dropped their pen or their pencil, they were behind because the data, the information is coming out fast and furious, and people are always looking for it. Did you get it? Right? And you know exactly, right? It's the head nods. But you walk out the door and you go, I don't know if I got it. But the person doing the briefing is saying, check the box. I got the briefing done, right? And so from our standpoint, what we really want to do is we want to turn this model on its head in a way. And our goal at the end of these sessions is to, in essence, certify the individual that we feel they're capable of doing the work. So how does this work? A couple simple steps. One is we have a meeting or a set up the coaching session ahead of time, where the person doing the coaching is going to tell the individual, here are the things you need to be looking at. Here are the work papers. Please review appropriate guidance, prior year papers, etc. And come prepared at our next meeting to walk me, the manager, through what it is you think you need to do and how you plan to do it. And that's the session that really is the money here, right? That's really what we want to have. We want to have the individual doing the work convince, in essence, their manager, their supervisor, the senior, whoever, that they are capable of doing the work. And the test to all this is asking the question at the end where the manager would say, I certify you as being capable of doing this task. And that really is the heart of this matter. And that interaction, by kind of turning it around and having the individual walk the person through it, really makes a huge difference in people's confidence levels if they're doing it, because I feel confident, I know what I'm doing now, they're being prepared, and they're really driving the discussion. And the goal here for the manager then is really just nudge and guide and add as needed, but really the bulk of the conversation should be driven by the associate or the person that's doing the work. And so our goal here, certify, not brief. Okay, Zach, next. There's some, call them better practices, right? So one of the keys to this thing is that this is really a commitment of time. We need to put time on the calendar. This isn't to be confused with what a lot of people say I'm doing coaching, which is day-to-day supervision, answering questions. Somebody stops by an office or a cube to have a discussion. This should be a sit down. It should be distraction free, and they should really just focus the time on getting through the material and the end, quote, that certification thing. Also, another really good practice that we say is make sure that at the end of the meeting, both parties are clear on how the work is going to be reviewed and when it is due, right? That's really important because we want to start getting that discipline into this, right? This isn't something to, oh, well, figure it out. It's like, no, I'd really like you, if I'm the manager, I would say, I would like you to bring this to me or submit it for work on Tuesday, the whatever of September. And we'll sit down and we'll review it together, or it'll go into the review queue and we'll talk about it when it gets done. So that's really important. And then the other really good practice, and we've seen this with a lot of teams, is when there's a large chunk of work, think of a whole array of testing or ledgers or something that has to go through. One of the things that we see as a good practice is this idea of doing an in-flight review, right? Which entails basically kind of launching the work, but then telling the individual, why don't you do the first fill in the blank, XXX, and when you've got those first batch done, why don't you come in and we'll just do an informal review and just make sure you're tracking well, right? And the key thing here is it gives people a chance to check it before they get way too far down the line, right? And there's nothing more demoralizing, right, than having somebody turn in a huge stack of work and there was a problem in the first test that they could have fixed that would have cleaned up the remaining, right? So key thing, right, keep that in-flight review. And again, another thing too, right, because people are often, kind of, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to, spend all this time coaching and things. Be strategic about how you set up these coaching sessions, right? Not every piece of work on your audit stack is going to require this kind of coaching. There's a lot of work, for example, a person's done it before, we haven't had any issues with it, go, great, we'll set them up, right? But think about the new person, right? Or it's a new area. No one has done work in this area before on the audit team. It's a new requirement that's been added. Or what we oftentimes find, there are certain parts of the audit that tend to drive lots of review notes. Think, for example, the walkthroughs, right? For external auditors, right? That's one. If we track the volume of review notes over the course of an audit, they tend to drive a lot of review notes. That might be a place where you do coaching. And also, too, what we've seen is that some of these also you could do, together. I mean, maybe it's a small group of people that are going to be working on a section and they could go through that together. So there's a lot of options for it. But again, be strategic about how you use this tool. It should have a high value. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So what is the key takeaway here? So first and foremost, find those opportunities to introduce this role reversal upfront coaching model that we talked about. And we say here, it's like, stop conducting the rush, the one directional, the fire hose. Make sure people have the resources and the tools available to them so they can prepare and they can present back to you. Establish a certification standard for every coaching session. And I say every, which is all those ones that you're doing in that model, right? After each coaching interaction, ask yourself, can I certify that this person fully understands that? And if the answer is not a clear yes, just work on those pieces that need to go. And then the other thing to do too is think about, I mentioned using this process strategically, but one of the things that's really interesting from the research is there are actually better times to do coaching, right? Like, for example, mornings tend to be better for people, but not on a Monday and not on a Friday. Find those times when people are going to be alert, awake, and engaged, and not in the press of the day, and they're exhausted and they're just looking at their watch saying, I just want to go home, it's late, right? And then also too, that idea of think about the timing. If you do give that kind of feedback, which is the review notes or others, are there high stress moments or deadlines, or you've had a difficult client interaction? Maybe I want to sit on it for a little bit, let things kind of take a deep breath and give it at a better time when people would be more receptive. Right. Great. Let's go to the next slide. So how do we self-correct, right? So coaching is one model, and we hopefully will reduce a lot of the volume in that through the coaching model, because people will be working at a higher level of proficiency. The other thing, though, is if I'm an individual working, I don't have a person staring over my shoulder. How could I self-correct? Excuse me. And one of the things that we ask when we do workshops with teams is we create two working versions of a checklist. And one version of the checklist is what we typically call if I'm a staff member, what are the top 10 things that I'm constantly being dinged on in review notes that if I could fix it and get rid of it, I wouldn't have the review notes, I wouldn't have to worry about it, right? So if caught before submission, right, what would eliminate that review note? And, the person sitting there scribbling on it who looks strangely like Mark Zuckerberg, not quite sure, I don't think that's him, but, we write that up in a workshop, right? And so these are some things that we've seen from teams that typically come up on these lists, right? We talk about the language that people use, right? Strong and precise verbs, right? There are very specific, there's like a vocabulary of audit language, and using that and not slipping into some stuff that isn't quite as sharp and as clear. There are always questions that team members have about what to do with, when they put work papers in the files, what they do with spreadsheets, hidden tabs, broken links, macros. I realize, there's a lot of tools that auditors have that help check that. But part of the issue with a lot of these is you have to remember to run the tool, right, before you submit stuff. Tick mark, protocols, those kinds of things are really important. Is everyone on the same page? Does everyone know what they're using? What's the standard list that we're using? I can't tell you how many teams where they kind of create their own, or someone comes from another audit and they bring their tick mark sets. It's the whatever the firm standard is plus whatever they've added kind of thing, and it creates confusion, and really creates confusion for the reviewers. Another thing we see is anything that would be client specific, right? How the company is mentioned in the work papers, or working with subcontractors or specialists, how they're referred to in the documentation. Keeping unnecessary documents out of the work papers. And then lastly, again, remembering the basics, but the key thing is remembering to do it. We all know, right? We should not be running this. We have to run the spell checker and that kind of thing. But some of those are actually require you to turn it on and run the feature. Okay. So let's go to the next one. So the second worksheet that we typically do, or the checklist that we do, is we ask the partners and the senior members of the team if they see these items in the work papers that they review, would that trigger a review note on their end, right? And the question that they answer typically is, I will write a review note if I see the following in the work papers. And again, this is kind of the most frequently hit list that I see, and there are certainly others based on where the audit is and what the partners are looking for. But you see this a lot, right? A purpose or conclusion statement in the work papers. The phrase I hear a lot from partners is, the purpose of is not the title of the work paper. There's really a reason we're doing that. We should be clear about this. Understanding of the coherence or clarity, right? And you can define this and further. I mean, some of these may be a little vague, but they can be defined a little bit more, right? The idea of professional skepticism. I mean, you hear that a lot. It's like for however they're writing or the term they're using, it doesn't really imply that they've got that kind of third-party objective look to it. And again, we mentioned this earlier, the idea of the tick marks and usage is there. Not using the most frequent or current application or compliance with the auditing standards. And you see this a lot, particularly when the environment is dynamic, things have changed, or there's new guidance that's come in that hasn't fully been put in place. Missing or weak documentation. It could be just it's not there, or it isn't clearly explained what's there. And then the last thing that we hear a lot is that as the reviewers go through the work papers, particularly in the workflow tools that the auditors use, there are checkboxes that aren't put in place. There certain things are not checked, yes or no, or whatever. There's blanks that should be filled in, that kind of thing. Let's go to the next slide. So next example, right? A real life example, and this was done in a workshop that I did, and the partner was trying to help his team understand what the critical elements were in doing a walkthrough. And in this particular example, I realized the print is a little hard to see, but he basically said, look, we're going to be out and we're going to be looking at 6 different hotel properties, right? This is a real estate trust that they were auditing. And there's 6 of them. And so we have to have all 6 done the same way. And what is it, if I'm setting this audit up from the front end, what are the things that I'm looking for in your work papers, in addition to just filling in the blanks and so forth on the audit program? And this was the grocery list of items on the list, right? So this was a really good example of that second checklist that I just talked about, which is, how do you end up with the I will write a review note question, right? He will write a review note in this particular example if he doesn't see these items in the work papers. And so it's a great way to get the team all on the same page and use this in the coaching, right? This becomes an artifact that you can take into the coaching. Okay. So action number 3, right? The key takeaway here is create team-specific critical review checklists. And, an important thing to remember is and I know a lot of you, I'm sure, work for firms that have critical self-review checklists, right? The concept of doing critical self-review is a critical audit skill, right? And people should be doing that. Unfortunately, what we find is that they tend to be quite lengthy. I've seen some that are like 100 items long, and we know, just common sense says, no one is going to spend time going through, okay, I got that, 100 items long. So get it narrowed on those critical few items that are having the biggest impact. And it's concise, it's 10 or less. And both reviewers and the preparers, right, agree on these are the things. And this list may change, right? So one of the things that we see is that once we start tamping down some of these initial ones after the first batch of the critical self-review, we can go on and start looking at other issues or other problems that pop up. but it always becomes a really good tool and a reference. And it's something that can, in the era of continuous improvement, we can keep focusing on and making sure. The other side of the coin, though, says it's a team protocol. And as a team protocol, it's something that we collectively, we on the audit, agree we will follow. And if somebody is not following it, then that becomes a point of discussion and saying, hey, guys, we need to get back to our critical self-review checklist. And then the second thing that I really encourage teams to do, and this is a way that we talk about this concept of, let's say, standardizing our work, right? So how do we get the team operating off the same script, the same playbook? We write stuff down so there's a common repository. And what I see is a lot of teams kind of have that already. They have files that they click, or there's something in a share drive that they say, hey, if you need something, go click there. But the point is, get that combined, put it into what we'd call the playbook, or the, our team's way of working. And that could include things like how you're going to do coaching. It could include the critical self-review checklist. It could include some basic client information, where to go, what the hours of the engagement are, when the meetings are, who the key players are. You can go on and on. And again, a lot of you probably have these, but the goal here is get them consolidated in one place. And I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about, oh my gosh, it's going to be a lot of hard work. That's a good project for your interns or the new guy, right? Because they're always in a really good position to say, okay, I'm new here. What did I need to know that I didn't, or was hard for me to find? Good. That's a good task for you. Why don't you start pulling and combining some of that stuff together? So getting the playbook together, getting your critical self-review checklist together are really critical. Okay. So where are we at the end here, right? Win-win, right? And realizing that we've just really kind of touched, just kind of skimmed the surface here, right? There are so many other things we can do, but, again, the key is to try to rend that thread, right? If we know we have issues with first pass yield, what are some things that we could do that we could implement quickly and that would have some impact? And therefore, right, we're going to improve our quality, right? We know we're going to do better because there'll be fewer pieces of our work that are going to end up being redone. It's right the first time, which is such a critical standard. The costs are going to go down, right? We talked about before the idea that all that rework time has a value to it. It's costing your audit time and money. It's distracting people from their main task, right? It's why one auditor told me it's like we're treading water, right? We're not moving the audit forward because we're spending so much time going backwards. Certainly efficiency is a real key to that thing. And then when you talk about the exceptional experience, it really has an impact both on the team themselves, the individuals, because they're spending their time doing the stuff they want to do, right? Which is, let's go have some, good audit experiences, right? I don't want to sit, late hours on a Friday night or on a Saturday cleaning up stuff that should have been fixed right the first time some time ago, right? And certainly that idea of energized performance, getting everybody tracking to the same beat, the same cadence on that really has a big impact. And overall, right, it's just think about the where you are now and how you can continually get better, right? It's the idea of continuous improvement. All right. Last and not least, hopefully everyone found this session useful. Here's some information about me and a book that has just come out. It's called Managing the Hell Out of Your Audit, which really takes a lot of the concept we just talked about and adds others that have value in improving the quality and the efficiency of the audit. This is also my contact information. I'm always happy to entertain questions off to the side or directly. And then last and not least, this is not your earmark model. This just is for me, but scan the code. That's a way to give me some direct feedback. And if you do fill in the code, I'll send you out some additional information on how to improve the review note cycle, which I know is kind of a hidden part of this discussion as well. So fill out, scan it, or enter the code there and give me some feedback. I appreciate, and it will generate an email for me that will give you some good information that you can carry forward. Okay. So with that, I see a couple of questions, Zach. Why don't I jump into a couple of these that I see in the chat?
Yeah, perfect.
And I know there may be some other ones that you have there. So Nima, good question. How can teams track first pass yield without adding a lot of extra admin work? That's a really good point, right? And the goal of these things, right? We don't want to put that kind of burden on the teams, but it's a relatively straightforward thing to catch. And you can either do it after the fact, right? You could look back, say at the end of a particular phase. You could very quickly go back and just count up review notes. A lot of audit programs that I've seen actually track the volume of review notes, both by reviewer, by individuals. And so that's a downloadable spreadsheet. So hopefully you have that. Otherwise, it should be, unless you don't have that kind of tracking, it should be a relatively straightforward thing. But you don't, and I certainly understand your point. You don't want it. This is one more thing that we have to do. It's like, oh my God, come on, give me a break. It should be pretty simple and straightforward. Second question. Yeah, the automating the critical self-review checklists. This is a question from Ryan. Have you seen success in automating critical self-review checklists? There are some, and now I think with a lot of the audit tools, right, there's the AI component to it, which is kind of staring over your shoulder. What I typically see, though, is that these handwritten lists tend to be more relevant and current than what's baked into the system that is, the same one that every other audit team in the firm gets, right? These are specific to this audit, this client, this group of teams. And to me, that's really the key takeaway. And for a lot of teams too, right? That critical self-review checklist is something I've seen it put on people's screens. They have it pops on their screen when they log on to that particular file. I've seen teams hang it up in the audit room on literally on the same flip chart that we used in the workshop. So the answer is yes, kind of, but I would again strongly encourage taking the list and really localizing it. If you have the ability to customize that in that audit software, then I would certainly take advantage of it. And also, too, while on the topic of critical self-review checklists, this should apply. I know there may be some, people on the call that are in small teams or even single individual practitioners, but you can build your own checklists, right? And use those as a way to validate your work. Those are simple, easy things to do. And I would certainly take advantage of it, regardless the size of your audit team. Obviously, the bigger team, the more impact it's going to have. But it works just as well on the onesies and twosies as it does on the 20s and 30s. Okay. Any other questions out there?
Yeah, I'm checking some of the other places we're streaming to. I see one that came in from Sarah. Do we use upfront coaching for setting up all our work?
Yeah, a great question, right? And all the work is probably too much because of the time and the energy that's expended. And in my mind, again, I think I mentioned this earlier, it's kind of a strategic play, right? Where are those critical pieces of the audit that we know we're going to have issues with? We want to focus some coaching energy there. Are there individuals maybe new to the audit or new to this particular audit? They could be new people to audit in general that would require more of that kind of support. And then the other area I talked about too is that are there things collectively where the team has been struggling? This could be areas that there's new guidance. It could be prior year that they had a lot of issues or a lot of review notes in. I mentioned the example of for example, walkthroughs is typically an area that of all the, and there are many other sections in the audit, but that's one you typically see a lot of review notes generated. Just because of the nature of how the work is done. But the other, just as an aside, the other issue with generating the review notes and particularly with things in like walkthroughs is that those tend to also linger quite a while in the system. just because of the nature of when they're done. And so what you often find with these kinds of review notes is not only are we generating the volume, but it's taking longer to get them cleared and back in, refreshed into the system. And many times it's like months. And I find teams, for example, that do walkthroughs in the early spring or late spring, early summer, they have review notes lingering in their files well into the fall. And imagine the amount of time and energy it's going to take for the individual that wrote that particular piece of work to go back and saying, okay, what was I doing 5 months ago, 6 months ago? I think I can do it. But it's going to take a longer time, and that the volume of work in the hidden factory is certainly going to increase. We like to say that review notes are not like fine wine, right? They do not age well. So get them in, get them cleared quickly. Any other questions out there, Zach?
Yeah, I see two about the hidden factory. So let me review both of these. What's usually the biggest source of hidden factory waste and audits that you see? And then do you have any other suggestions on how to deal with the volume of work in your hidden factory?
Sure. Oh, great question. So, really, it's the volume of review notes, right? And it not getting them cleared quickly is kind of the second piece to that. And it's the pieces of the work that aren't done right the first time that end up going back. And what becomes, really, kind of egregious, I don't know, egregious is the right word, but becomes really kind of builds that hidden factory up more, is when work goes all the way through and then comes all the way back, right? For example, it's reviewed at the senior level, the manager level, maybe a senior manager level, and then a partner looks at it and goes, "Yep, no, this isn't right." Boom, we all go back. And that's when that pile of work just kind of increases dramatically. So that's certainly, again, just the sheer volume of review notes. And then the other piece to the hidden factory is not so much, I would say, the review note volume, but it's the volume of unfinished work that's lingering, that's not been closed out. And that, again, is sitting there creating this backlog, right? Because you've got all this work from a previous phase that hasn't been totally completed yet or closed out. And you're adding new work to it in the next phase, along with all of the other attendant issues. And the volume just starts building, and eventually you got to build a bigger factory, right? Roy Schneider, I need a bigger boat, right? And I'm sorry, Zach, what was the second part of the question?
Do you have any other suggestions on how to deal with the volume of work?
Yeah, so volume, right? Again, it's like the goal is to keep the doors closed to the hidden factory. It's like anything that we can do to eliminate the likelihood of work getting into that system, right? So looking at ways to reduce the volume of review notes, I think is the most critical thing you can look at. And it's good coaching. It's using tools like the critical self-review checklist. And then also, just from a project management standpoint, it's staying on top of the work and not letting work drag, right? Really having critical times in the model where things can get closed out. The third thing that I found is really helpful. And we talk about, and some of you may be familiar with the concept, and it has different terms to it, but they call it the live review, which is an opportunity for the individual to present the work that they've just done to all the reviewers simultaneously. And it gives them the opportunity to talk among themselves and to agree on what those 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 things are. And the individual that prepared it has a very clear picture of, if, okay, we all 3 reviewers or 2 reviewers, we agree the following 5 things need to be fixed. That person then can go back with a really clear picture of what's done, get that work cleared quickly, and it eliminates a lot of the send it up, send it back, send it double up, send it back kind of thing that you get into with all these rework loops. And so that to me is also a really powerful tool. Again, use that tool strategically. It has again, high impact and could have a significant impact on some of those areas that are overly complex, or particularly when you find reviewers that don't necessarily agree on, quote, what good is, it's a great way to align the reviewers before they give the feedback to the individual.
Great. And I see one final question.
Okay.
What else should we include in the team playbook you suggest?
Great. Well, the team playbooks, I mean, I've seen, again, depending on the level of energy, and also it depends on the size of the teams. Lots of teams, they can get quite large. But, I mentioned just the basics, right? So if I'm a new person coming onto the audit, I answer the question, what do you need to know in order to start work on this audit? Right. And it could be simple stuff like, if you're not working remotely, you've got to go to the office. How do you get in the door? Where do you park? It could be things like you need a lunch pass, that kind of simple stuff. It could also have links or references to critical files about the company, who the key people are, the organizational chart, who the client contacts are for each area. Procedural side of it, right? So for example, teams might have a chapter on how we're going to conduct walkthroughs, how we're going to do testing, how we're going to close out a particular phase of work. The review process, right? What are we doing from the review process? What pieces get the coaching, what don't? So it can be as big or as little as makes sense. Again, the question, I always ask of the teams, it's like I always ask, who's the newest person on the team, and what did you need to know that it took you a lot of time or a lot of energy to find out, or you never found out? And they'll always tell you. And that to me is always a really good starting point, right? What do you need to get your feet in the door?
Great. Well, that's everything I see. So thank you so much, Bill. And thank you for everyone who attended and watched this live. And if you are here live, here's a quick reminder on how you can earn your CPE for attending today's session.
Today's event has ended. To earn CPE, go to earmark.app or scan the QR code on the screen. Then log in or create your free account. Search for the course by tapping on the magnifying glass icon on the home screen and then entering the name of this event. It takes a few days to make the course, so if you're attending this event live, keep an eye out for an email letting you know when the course is available. Pass the quiz to earn your CPE, then tap the button to email yourself a certificate. Stay tuned for more events from Earmark. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.